The moment a badge becomes more important than fairness, it stops protecting the public and starts protecting the wrong person. At exactly 7:15 on a cool Thursday evening, Officer Ethan Walker stood beneath the bright fluorescent lights of the county police headquarters, staring at the small silver badge resting in the open palm of Captain Daniel Brooks. Around them, the administrative office remained unusually quiet. No raised voices echoed through the hallway. No reporters waited outside the building. There was only a single sheet of official paperwork lying across the captain's desk and a silence that seemed heavier than any argument. Captain Brooks looked at Ethan with the calm expression of someone who had delivered difficult news before. "Officer Walker," he said evenly, "effective immediately, you are ordered to surrender your badge pending the final outcome of an internal disciplinary action." Ethan did not argue. He slowly unclipped the badge from the front of his uniform, held it for one brief moment, and placed it into the captain's waiting hand. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had begun his shift believing he was one of the department's most dependable patrol officers. Now he stood without the symbol that had defined his career. As Captain Brooks secured the badge inside a small evidence envelope, Ethan could not stop replaying a single question in his mind. How had one routine traffic stop ended here? 14 hours earlier, the answer had seemed impossible to imagine. The evening sun still hung above the streets as Ethan drove his patrol vehicle through a quiet commercial district on the edge of the city. Families filled neighborhood restaurants. Children laughed while leaving a nearby community center. The streets carried the comfortable rhythm of another ordinary weekday. Dispatch traffic remained light, and Ethan expected the remainder of his shift to pass without incident. Then a dark blue sedan rolled through a stop sign more slowly than normal before continuing down the next block. The movement was subtle, but Ethan immediately activated his emergency lights. The sedan pulled safely onto the shoulder within seconds. From inside his patrol vehicle, Ethan observed a young black woman sitting alone behind the wheel. She placed both hands on the steering wheel before he even approached the driver's window. Every movement suggested cooperation rather than hesitation. Ethan stepped toward the vehicle with practiced confidence. "Good evening," he said. "I am Officer Ethan Walker. The reason I stopped you is that you did not come to a complete stop at the intersection back there. May I please see your driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance?" The young woman nodded politely. "Of course, officer." Her voice remained calm as she handed each document across the window. Her driver's license identified her as Olivia Carter. Everything appeared current and properly organized. Ethan glanced from the license back to Olivia. She maintained steady eye contact without sounding defensive or impatient. "Is there anything else you need from me?" she asked respectfully. Ethan looked once more at the name printed on the license before returning his attention to her. For reasons he could not explain, he felt an immediate urge to look deeper into the stop than the simple traffic violation justified. At that moment, neither of them realized that the next decision made beside that quiet roadside would begin a chain of events that would carry one name through the department before sunrise and leave one badge resting on a captain's desk by the following morning. Olivia Carter waited quietly behind the steering wheel while Officer Ethan Walker returned to his patrol vehicle with her driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. The evening remained calm as traffic continued flowing through the intersection only a few yards away. Everything about the stop appeared routine. The documents were valid. The vehicle was properly registered. There were no outstanding alerts connected to the license plate. Ethan entered Olivia's information into the mobile computer and watched as each database returned the same result. Valid driver's license. No active warrants. No criminal history. No registration issues. For most officers, the stop would have ended with either a warning or a simple citation. Ethan looked once more through the windshield toward the dark blue sedan. Olivia remained exactly where she had been instructed, both hands resting on the steering wheel, patiently waiting without reaching for her cellular telephone or showing any sign of frustration. Instead of closing the stop, Ethan requested an additional records inquiry through dispatch. "Dispatch, run another verification on Olivia Carter. I want a complete return." The dispatcher answered without hesitation. "Copy that, Unit 12. Stand by. Ethan continued studying the information on the screen. Nothing justified additional suspicion, yet he found himself searching for something that would explain why he believed the encounter deserved more attention than a minor traffic violation. A few moments later, dispatch responded. Unit 12, second verification complete. Driver information remains clear. No wants, no warrants. Everything appears valid. Ethan acknowledged the transmission but did not immediately step out of his cruiser. Instead, he opened another departmental database and reviewed the registered address listed on Olivia's driver's license. It matched every other official record. There were no inconsistencies. He finally returned to the sedan. Olivia lowered the window before he spoke. "Miss Carter, where are you coming from this evening?" She answered calmly. "I just finished volunteering at a youth mentoring program downtown." Ethan looked toward the neatly organized folders resting on the passenger seat. "And where are you headed now?" "Home." Her tone never changed. She offered direct answers without hesitation, making no attempt to argue about the reason for the questions. Ethan glanced inside the vehicle again. Nothing appeared unusual. Everything was clean, organized, and entirely consistent with what she had told him. Even so, he continued, "Do you have any identification besides your driver's license?" Olivia reached slowly into her purse after informing him exactly what she was doing. She removed a university identification card and handed it across the window. Ethan examined it carefully. The photograph matched. The name matched. The expiration date remained current. Once again, nothing raised legitimate concern. Olivia watched him quietly before speaking in the same respectful voice she had used since the stop began. "Officer, have I done something beyond the traffic violation?" Ethan paused before answering. "I am still determining that." Olivia gave a small nod. "I understand. I will continue cooperating." Her patience surprised him. Most drivers would have questioned why the stop had continued after every record came back clean. She simply waited. Ethan stepped away from the vehicle and contacted dispatch one more time. "Unit 12 requesting a supervisor to my location." The dispatcher sounded slightly surprised. "Copy, Unit 12. Do you require assistance?" Ethan looked back toward the quiet young woman sitting alone inside the sedan. "Negative. I just want another set of eyes." Olivia could hear only fragments of the radio conversation, but she remained seated exactly where she was. She believed that if the process remained fair, the truth would eventually speak for itself. Neither she nor Ethan realized that the routine supervisor request was about to become the first official decision that would place the entire encounter under a level of scrutiny neither of them had expected when the emergency lights first illuminated the evening roadway. Captain Daniel Brooks arrived less than 5 minutes later and parked his patrol sport utility vehicle behind Officer Ethan Walker's cruiser. The evening remained peaceful, and nothing about the roadside suggested an urgent situation. Families continued driving home after dinner, commuters passed through the intersection without slowing, and the cool breeze carried the sounds of ordinary life across the quiet neighborhood. Ethan walked toward his captain with Olivia Carter's documents in hand. "Everything checks out," Ethan admitted. "But something about this stop does not feel right." Captain Brooks reviewed the driver's license, registration, and insurance card before looking toward the dark blue sedan. "What specifically concerns you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. "I cannot point to one thing. I just believe there is more here than a simple traffic violation." The captain studied him carefully before asking the question every experienced supervisor eventually asks. "Do you have any objective evidence supporting that belief?" Ethan looked down at the paperwork. "No, sir." Captain Brooks handed the documents back. "Then continue with facts. Facts are easier to defend than instincts." Ethan acknowledged the instruction, but instead of concluding the stop, he returned to Olivia's vehicle once again. She lowered the window immediately, her expression still composed despite the growing length of the encounter. "Miss Carter," Ethan said, "I need you to step out of the vehicle for a few moments." Olivia complied without hesitation. She informed him before opening the door, stepped onto the shoulder, and stood exactly where directed. "Is there a problem with my paperwork?" she asked politely. Not at this time, Ethan replied. I simply need to continue the investigation. Olivia nodded. All right. Captain Brooks remained several yards away, quietly observing rather than interfering. Ethan conducted a visual inspection of the passenger compartment from outside the vehicle. Everything appeared orderly. A backpack rested neatly on the rear seat. Several textbooks and volunteer program folders sat beside a reusable water bottle. There were no signs of illegal activity, no damaged property, and nothing inconsistent with Olivia's explanation that she had been mentoring students earlier that evening. Ethan returned his attention to Olivia. How long have you lived at the address listed on your driver's license? Almost 6 years, she answered. Do you live alone? No, officer. Who lives there with you? Olivia paused briefly before responding. My father. Ethan wrote a short note in his field notebook. What does your father do? Olivia looked at him calmly. He works in law enforcement. Ethan glanced up. What department? Olivia met his eyes without changing her tone. I would rather allow official records to answer questions about my family if they become relevant. I am happy to answer questions about myself. Her response remained respectful, yet it immediately caught Ethan's attention. To him, it sounded unusually careful. To Olivia, it was simply the principle her father had taught her since childhood. Never use another person's position to influence official decisions. Ethan stepped away once more and quietly relayed the conversation to Captain Brooks. The captain listened without interruption before asking, Did she refuse to identify herself? No. Did she refuse your instructions? No. Did she provide false information? No. Captain Brooks looked toward Olivia, who remained patiently waiting beside her vehicle exactly where she had been asked to stand. Then remember why we are here, he said evenly. We investigate conduct, not assumptions. Ethan nodded, but uncertainty still lingered in his mind. At that same moment, the routine stop entered another stage when dispatch transmitted a calm update across the radio. Unit 12, Records advises there is additional information associated with the registered address. Stand by for supervisor notification. Neither Ethan nor Olivia knew that the next radio transmission would quietly connect this ordinary roadside encounter to someone whose name every officer in the department recognized. Dispatch remained silent for several seconds before the radio came alive again. Unit 12, Records has identified additional information connected to the registered address. The information is restricted to supervisory personnel. Captain Brooks, please contact communications on the secure channel. Captain Daniel Brooks acknowledged the transmission and stepped a short distance away before switching to the department's encrypted radio frequency. Officer Ethan Walker watched him carefully, trying to read the captain's expression, but Brooks revealed nothing while listening to the dispatcher. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the captain slowly returned to Ethan with the same calm professionalism he had maintained throughout the stop. The address belongs to the residence of Police Chief Marcus Carter, he said quietly. Ethan looked back toward Olivia Carter standing patiently beside her sedan. She is the chief's daughter? Captain Brooks nodded once. According to official records, yes. Ethan immediately glanced toward Olivia again, expecting some sign that she intended to use her father's position. Instead, she remained exactly where she had been instructed, hands folded calmly in front of her, waiting without complaint. She had never mentioned the chief. She had never requested special treatment. She had never hinted that someone important would intervene on her behalf. Captain Brooks studied Ethan's reaction before speaking again. Remember something important. Her relationship to the chief changes nothing about how we handle this stop. We follow the same procedures we would follow with anyone else. Ethan nodded, although the discovery left him unsettled. Should we notify him? Captain Brooks answered without hesitation. Department policy requires that command staff be informed whenever an immediate family member of an executive officer becomes involved in a law enforcement incident. That notification is administrative, not personal. The captain contacted communications through the secure channel once more. Several miles away, Police Chief Marcus Carter was finishing a community meeting inside department headquarters when a communications lieutenant quietly entered the room and informed him that an urgent administrative notification required his attention. The chief excused himself, stepped into a private office, and answered the secure telephone. After listening to the dispatcher summarize the situation, he asked only 3 questions. "Is my daughter safe?" The answer came immediately. "Yes, Chief." He continued, "Has anyone reported injuries?" "Negative." Finally, he asked, "Is every interaction being documented through body camera and radio recordings?" "Yes, Chief." Marcus Carter thanked the dispatcher before ending the call. He remained standing in silence for a few moments before contacting the deputy chief. "I have received an administrative notification involving a member of my family," he said calmly. "Effective immediately, I am recusing myself from any operational decisions connected to the incident. Please ensure every procedure is followed exactly as it would be in any other case." The deputy chief agreed without hesitation. Back at the roadside, Olivia looked toward Captain Brooks. "May I ask a question, Captain?" "Of course." "Has someone contacted my father?" Brooks answered honestly. "Department policy required an administrative notification." Olivia gave a quiet nod. "That is what I expected." Ethan looked at her with genuine curiosity. "You knew that would happen?" She smiled gently. "My father has always told me that public trust depends on following the rules, especially when those rules involve our own family." Her answer lingered in the evening air. There was no request for favors, no expectation of influence, and no attempt to change the outcome of the stop. While the city continued moving around them, the police chief had deliberately stepped away from authority, leaving only official procedures to determine what happened next, unaware that those very procedures would soon reveal far more than anyone standing beside the quiet roadside expected. Captain Daniel Brooks quietly returned Olivia Carter's driver's license and university identification card while maintaining the same calm professionalism that had defined the encounter from the beginning. "Miss Carter, thank you for your patience," he said. "Department policy requires us to complete several administrative steps now that the notification has been made." Olivia accepted the documents with a respectful nod. "I understand, Captain." She did not ask whether her father was coming. She did not ask for the stop to end. She simply waited, trusting the process her father had taught her to respect since childhood. Officer Ethan Walker stood a few feet away, watching the exchange. He had expected the atmosphere to change the moment everyone learned Olivia was the police chief's daughter. Instead, nothing changed except the level of attention being given to every decision. Captain Brooks looked toward Ethan. "Continue documenting everything exactly as it occurred. Do not add assumptions. Do not remove details. Write only what you personally observed." Ethan immediately opened his field notebook and began reviewing the sequence of events. The original reason for the stop remained a minor traffic violation. Every records inquiry had returned valid information. Olivia had complied with every lawful instruction. She had answered every question respectfully. As he wrote those facts down, Ethan noticed something uncomfortable. The length of the stop no longer matched the simplicity of the original violation. Before he could say anything, dispatch contacted Captain Brooks once again through the secure radio channel. "Captain Brooks, command staff has confirmed the chief has formally recused himself from all operational involvement. The deputy chief has directed that every action continue under normal procedures with complete documentation." Brooks acknowledged the message before turning back toward Ethan. "That is exactly how it should be." Olivia quietly listened without interrupting. There was a sense of relief in her expression, not because someone important had been notified, but because she knew her father had chosen the same path he always demanded from every officer in the department. Ethan finally addressed Olivia directly. "You knew your father would stay out of this, did not you?" She answered with quiet confidence. "Yes, if he treated me differently than anyone else, everything he has spent his career teaching would lose its meaning." Ethan studied her face for a moment. There was no pride in her answer, no attempt to impress anyone. She was simply stating something she believed to be true. Captain Brooks looked between the two of them before speaking in an even voice. Public trust is not tested when procedures are easy. It is tested when they become personal. Those words settled over the quiet roadside. Ethan slowly realized that throughout the entire encounter, the only person who had never allowed personal relationships to influence the situation was Olivia herself. She had never mentioned her father until directly asked about who lived at her address. She had never hinted that the department leadership knew her family. She had simply allowed the official process to unfold. A few moments later, another notification appeared on Ethan's mobile computer. The department's digital evidence system had automatically flagged the incident because it involved an immediate family member of an executive officer. Department policy required that all body camera footage, radio communications, dispatch logs, and written reports be preserved for administrative review before the end of the shift. Ethan quietly read the notification twice before looking toward Captain Brooks. "Everything from this stop will be reviewed?" Brooks nodded. "Every second." Ethan glanced at his body camera mounted securely on his uniform. For the first time that evening, he was no longer thinking about Olivia Carter's identity. He was thinking about every decision he had made since activating his emergency lights, realizing that by the time the sun rose the following morning, it would not be family connections deciding his future. It would be the complete and unedited record of his own actions. The roadside encounter finally came to a close just before sunset. Captain Daniel Brooks thanked Olivia Carter for her cooperation, returned the final documents, and informed her that she was free to leave. Olivia acknowledged him with a courteous smile before getting back into her sedan. She did not mention her father. She did not ask whether Officer Ethan Walker would face consequences. She simply fastened her seatbelt, started the engine, and carefully merged back into traffic. Within seconds, her vehicle disappeared into the steady flow of evening commuters. Ethan watched the taillights fade into the distance before turning toward his captain. "Was this really necessary?" he asked quietly. Captain Brooks looked at him without judgment. "That is the wrong question. The better question is whether every decision you made can be explained by facts alone." Ethan did not answer immediately. The two officers returned to their patrol vehicles and completed the remainder of their shifts without another significant call. Yet the traffic stop stayed in Ethan's mind long after the radio had fallen quiet. Shortly after midnight, inside the department's professional standards unit, the digital evidence system automatically collected every recording connected to the incident. Body camera footage from both officers, dashboard camera video, dispatch audio, computer-aided dispatch. Records and mobile computer activity logs were securely preserved under department policy because the incident involved an immediate family member of an executive officer. No one edited the recordings. No one selected individual moments. Every second was retained exactly as it happened. Early the following morning, an administrative review began under the authority of the deputy chief, while Police Chief Marcus Carter remained completely removed from the process. Before the first recording was played, the deputy chief addressed everyone in the room. "This review concerns conduct, not relationships. We will evaluate actions, documentation, and compliance with department policy. Nothing more." The first body camera recording appeared on the screen. Investigators watched Ethan initiate the stop for the traffic violation. They observed Olivia immediately pull over safely, keep both hands visible, provide every requested document without delay, and answer every question respectfully. The recording continued. Every records inquiry confirmed the same information. Valid license, valid registration, valid insurance, no warrants, no criminal history, no conflicting identification. The investigators then compared Ethan's documented observations with the timeline generated by the patrol vehicle computer. Every request, every database inquiry, every radio transmission, and every additional investigative step carried an exact timestamp. One supervisor quietly noted the growing length of the stop after every legitimate concern had already been resolved. Another investigator replayed the conversation where Captain Brooks reminded Ethan to rely on objective facts rather than instinct. The room remained silent. No one rushed to conclusions because the evidence was still unfolding. Next came the secure dispatch recording confirming that Olivia's address belonged to Police Chief Marcus Carter. Investigators immediately noticed something important. Olivia had never attempted to use her father's position. In fact, she had deliberately avoided mentioning his title until directly asked about her household. Moments later, another recording confirmed that the chief had formally recused himself and ordered that normal procedures continue without his involvement. The deputy chief paused the review and looked around the conference table. "Everything we need is here," he said calmly. The cameras recorded the encounter. The computers recorded the decisions. The radio recorded the instructions. Now our responsibility is simply to compare those facts with department policy. As the review continued into the morning, Ethan remained seated outside the conference room waiting to be interviewed, slowly realizing that the outcome no longer depended on opinions, assumptions, or personal connections. It depended entirely on a complete record that never forgot a single decision made from the moment his emergency lights first illuminated the quiet evening road. Officer Ethan Walker remained seated alone outside the Professional Standards conference room as the hours passed with unusual silence. Every few minutes, another investigator entered the room carrying a printed report, a digital evidence summary, or a policy manual. No one hurried through the hallway. No one appeared interested in reaching a quick conclusion. The department had one responsibility, and everyone involved understood it. The final decision had to be based on evidence instead of assumptions. Ethan replayed the traffic stop in his mind again and again. At the time, every additional question had felt reasonable. Every delay had seemed justified. Yet, as he remembered Captain Daniel Brooks asking whether objective facts supported those decisions, he found himself unable to answer with the same confidence he had felt the previous evening. Shortly after 8 o'clock that morning, Captain Brooks stepped out of the conference room and quietly motioned for Ethan to join him. Inside, several members of the Professional Standards Unit remained seated around the conference table. The deputy chief greeted Ethan professionally before inviting him to sit. "Officer Walker," he began calmly, "this interview is part of the administrative review. We are interested in understanding your decision-making process. Please answer each question honestly." Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir." An investigator opened the first report. "Your original reason for initiating the traffic stop was a traffic violation. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Did the driver immediately comply with your emergency lights?" "Yes." "Were the driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance valid?" "Yes." "Did any records inquiry reveal an outstanding warrant, suspended license, criminal alert, or conflicting identity?" Ethan looked briefly toward the tabletop before answering. "No." Another investigator activated a monitor displaying synchronized body camera footage alongside the dispatch timeline. The recordings showed Olivia Carter answering every question respectfully, remaining patient throughout the encounter, and following every lawful instruction without hesitation. They also showed Captain Brooks reminding Ethan to rely on objective facts rather than personal instincts. The investigator paused the recording before asking the next question. After receiving those reminders and the additional records confirmation, what specific evidence caused you to continue expanding the stop? The room remained completely quiet. Ethan searched his memory, hoping to identify one fact that had justified every additional step. Instead, he found only uncertainty. After several long seconds, he answered honestly, "I believed something did not seem right, but I cannot identify objective evidence supporting that belief." No one interrupted him. The deputy chief simply made a note before continuing. Department policy allows officers to investigate when articulable facts support reasonable suspicion. Feelings alone do not satisfy that standard. Ethan slowly nodded. Hearing the policy spoken aloud while watching his own recorded decisions created a clarity he had not experienced on the roadside. For the first time since the stop began, he fully understood the difference between caution and assumption. Captain Brooks remained silent until the questioning concluded. Then he looked directly at Ethan. "Every officer makes decisions under pressure. What defines professionalism is the willingness to learn when evidence shows those decisions should have been different." Ethan accepted those words without argument. Across town, Police Chief Marcus Carter had still not requested a single update about the investigation involving his daughter. He had deliberately honored his recusal from beginning to end, allowing the department to evaluate the incident exactly as it would any other case. By late morning, the investigators completed their interviews and organized the final findings for command review. As Ethan quietly left the conference room, he realized the most difficult part of the morning had not been answering questions. It had been recognizing that the strongest evidence in the building had never spoken a single word because every camera, every report, and every recorded decision had already told the entire story. By late morning, the administrative review reached its final stage. Every report had been completed, every recording had been examined, and every policy reference had been compared against the documented decisions made during the previous evening. Inside the command conference room, the deputy chief reviewed the final summary one last time before placing the completed file on the table. Around him sat members of the Professional Standards Unit, Captain Daniel Brooks, and the department legal advisor. Police Chief Marcus Carter was not present. He had honored his recusal from the beginning of the investigation and remained completely separated from every discussion, allowing the department to reach its conclusions without influence or appearance of favoritism. The deputy chief looked around the room before speaking. The evidence is consistent across every source. The original traffic stop was supported by a traffic violation. The driver's cooperation remained complete throughout the encounter. Department records confirmed valid identification, valid vehicle registration, valid insurance, no outstanding warrants, and no objective facts supporting the continued expansion of the stop. No one disagreed. The synchronized body camera footage, radio communications, dispatch records, and mobile computer activity all confirmed the same sequence of events. There were no missing recordings. There were no conflicting statements. Every second of the encounter had been preserved exactly as it happened. Captain Brooks quietly added one final observation. Officer Walker was reminded during the stop to rely on objective facts. The decision to continue extending the encounter remained his responsibility. The deputy chief slowly nodded before signing the administrative findings. Based upon the totality of the evidence and the department policies governing investigative detentions, this review finds that Officer Ethan Walker failed to maintain the objective standards required of this department. Effective immediately, his law enforcement authority is terminated, and his department badge shall be surrendered. There was no celebration inside the room. No one expressed satisfaction. Administrative accountability was never treated as a victory. It was simply the department honoring the standards expected of every officer, regardless of position or years of service. A few minutes later, Ethan entered Captain Brooks's office after being asked to report there. The atmosphere felt remarkably similar to the one that had opened the story. Captain Brooks stood behind his desk holding a small evidence envelope while the signed administrative order rested beside it. He looked at Ethan with genuine respect rather than disappointment. "This decision was based on documented evidence," he said calmly. "It was not based on who Miss Carter's father is." Ethan slowly nodded. "I understand," Captain Brooks continued. "The body cameras recorded your decisions. The dispatch system recorded your requests. The computer recorded every inquiry. The department followed the evidence exactly where it led." Ethan reached toward the front of his uniform and carefully unclipped the silver badge he had worn with pride throughout his career. For several quiet seconds, he simply held it in his hand, reflecting on how quickly confidence can disappear when judgment moves ahead of evidence. Without speaking another word, he placed the badge into Captain Brooks's open hand. Neither officer attempted to fill the silence. There was nothing left to argue because the recordings had already answered every important question. Outside the office window, another group of patrol officers prepared to begin their shifts, each fastening a badge to a clean uniform before heading into the community they had sworn to serve. Ethan watched them for a brief moment before turning toward the door. He understood at last that losing the badge had not begun that morning inside the captain's office. It had begun the previous evening on a quiet roadside when assumptions were allowed to stay longer than the facts that should have replaced them. 6 months later, The traffic stop that had once seemed like an ordinary evening had quietly become part of the department's training curriculum for every newly assigned patrol officer. The recordings were no longer reviewed because of the people involved. They were studied because they demonstrated how easily professional judgment could drift away from objective evidence when assumptions were allowed to influence decision-making. Inside the police academy classroom, a group of recruits watched carefully as selected portions of the body camera recordings appeared on the training screen. The instructor paused several times, not to criticize anyone, but to ask a simple question. At this exact moment, what objective fact justified the next decision? The room often became silent. One recruit answered, "None." Another replied, "The evidence had already answered the original reason for the stop." The instructor nodded. That is the lesson. Good officers never stop asking what the facts actually support. Across the city, Olivia Carter continued living the same life she had lived before the incident. She returned to her volunteer mentoring program every week, finished her university studies, and never accepted invitations to speak publicly about what had happened. When local organizations asked her to share her experience, she politely declined. She believed the story had never been about her. It had been about the importance of treating every person with fairness before reaching conclusions. Police Chief Marcus Carter continued serving the department with the same quiet discipline that had defined his entire career. During leadership meetings, he never referred to the incident by name. He simply reminded supervisors that public confidence is earned through consistent accountability, especially when difficult decisions involve members of their own profession. His refusal to interfere during the investigation became an example repeated throughout the department. Officers understood that integrity is measured most clearly when leaders choose principle over personal interest. Captain Daniel Brooks often found himself sharing another lesson with young patrol officers beginning their careers. "Your badge gives you authority," he would say, "but your judgment determines whether the community continues trusting you with it." Those words carried extra meaning because everyone knew they had been reinforced by real events rather than classroom theory. As for Ethan Walker, he quietly accepted the outcome of the investigation without attempting to shift responsibility onto anyone else. He understood that the department had not reached its decision because Olivia was the police chief's daughter. The decision had been reached because every camera, every report, every radio transmission, and every documented action pointed toward the same conclusion. The evidence had spoken with complete consistency. Looking back, the incident had never truly been about a traffic stop, a family connection, or even a badge. It had always been about the invisible moment when assumptions begin replacing evidence. Imagine standing beside a quiet roadside believing you already understood the person in front of you, only to discover that the greatest mistake was never asking one more question. The greatest mistake was failing to recognize when the available facts had already provided every answer you needed. Long after the paperwork was archived, the recording stored, and the investigation completed, one lesson continued echoing through every patrol briefing and every academy classroom. Authority may begin with a badge, but respect begins with fairness, and justice becomes worthy of public trust only when every decision is guided by evidence before opinion, character before assumption, and truth before everything else.